Okay, I think we're good to start. Welcome everyone to our event in conversation with Dr. Strang. I'm Danielle, I'm the Executive Director at AboutFace. Thanks to each of you for attending today, and thanks to all of you who have sent in questions for this conversation. We're looking forward to getting started. Just a couple of housekeeping pieces. We're in webinar mode, so the only people you'll see today are Dr. Strang and Annie Spooner and myself occasionally. And if you want to ask a question, you can submit a question through the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And we are recording this to make it available later on our YouTube channel. So I'm going to be handing this off to Annie Spooner. Annie is a radical self-acceptance advocate, a board director at AboutFace, and the founder and CEO of Plurally.com, which is a photo and video stock agency with a social justice mission. Annie, over to you.
Thank you, Danielle. So hi, everyone. I'm Annie Spooner, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to our conversation with Dr. Strang. Dr. Strang is the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Nova Scotia. And Dr. Strang was also born with a cleft lip and gum. And he's joining us today to share his experiences and expertise on many topics important to the facial difference community. So, hi, Dr. Strang. Welcome.
Hi, Annie. Hi, Danielle. And hi, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with you today.
It's so nice to have you here. Thank you. I'd like to start things off with an introduction. Please tell us about yourself.
So for today, I mean, there's lots I could say, but for today, I'll just give you, yeah, as you said, I'm the Chief Medical Officer, but, very heavily involved with the COVID response. But for today, I mean, I was born with a cleft lip and gum. I was actually born in what's now Zimbabwe, so born in Southern Africa. Came to Canada when I was 5. I had all my surgery, so I had 2 surgeries when I was an infant, and then one when I was between 2 and 3. I don't remember much of any of them, other than I still have a memory after my 3rd surgery as a toddler. I got a brand new red car, and I still remember getting that after my surgery was my kind of treat for the surgery. An interesting fact about a little bit of history about plastic surgery. I was very fortunate because this was in the late 60s, or actually middle. I was born in 1959, so the surgeries would have been 1960 and then probably 63. I was very fortunate that there was a highly trained and skilled plastic surgeon in the capital of now Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe. And the interesting fact of him, he was actually a pilot in the Battle of Britain, part of World War II. And folks who don't know, there was in the 1940, there was a lot of air battle in part of that war over Britain. There were a lot of pilots who were badly burned, and huge advances were made in Britain, having to treat all those badly burned pilots. And many of them, because they all were, the only part of their body that was actually exposed was their face. So many of them had very bad facial burns. And there was a lot of advances were made in facial surgeries and reconstructive surgeries and plastic surgery. And one of my surgeon was actually a fighter pilot who was badly burned, and because of his experience, went on to be trained as a plastic surgeon. And so I was fortunate to have somebody. It was rare to have somebody with that level of surgical skill in Africa at that time. So I was very fortunate. And so I grew up. I mean, it was never. I know my facial difference is minor compared to many others, and it never really impacted me. But I think it's always something that you're aware of. And but I guess my key message is we are who we are, and we should accept ourselves for what we are and accept others, and don't let any differences stop us from doing whatever we want to do.
Exactly. That's such a good message. I completely agree with you on that. So many people joining us today are interested in learning more about your experience growing up with a cleft lip and gum. And we've received a lot of questions from our community. And specifically questions from our youngest members and their families. So I'm wondering, what age were you when you first became aware that you had a cleft lip? And how did that impact you?
It's probably my first memories are anything as a child, probably was around 4 or 5, and just realizing that I had a scar. I looked a little different, but it's I think because I had 2 older sisters and a brother. They were brought up. I was raised, or they grew up with me, and just so there was never any major challenges in the family. So I'm just recognizing that I had had the scar really, and occasionally it would kind of make bother me a little bit of why I look a little bit different, but unfortunately, it never was any created any major issues for me.
Yes. Okay. That's wonderful. So so you were saying that your parents and your family it was just natural and everything was normal. And were there other people in your life that when you were growing up that supported you? And I'm wondering also, what do you think parents can do to support their kids as they go through treatments and therapies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that as I said, I was really little when I had that. I do remember talking to my mom when I was an adult. There's pictures of me being a baby, and for instance, I had to have mittens on my hand after my first 2 as an infant, so I wouldn't pick at my surgical scar, or the sutures and stuff. So, and I think I had some feeding challenges, and so I think my mom had to pay extra attention for me as I have a younger sister, but she was born a number of years later. So I was the youngest in a family of 4, and I think I needed some extra special attention. So, but beyond that, I think there's lots of support. I think the main message I would give to, parents is that, we're all different in some way. And some differences are more visible than others, but that really the acceptance of that, and understanding that everybody is different in different ways, and I think giving that support and helping kids understand that just because they're different, giving them strength and confidence, and making I think the biggest thing we can give to kids is that make sure they're loved no matter what, and they have all the opportunities that anybody else could have, and they have the ability to succeed in those opportunities.
It's true. It's true. And I always say that people who have facial differences, we can see the challenges right on their face. You can expect, but we don't know, other humans don't know the challenges other people are going out, that are going on in their lives, that are inside, So I think, yes, we all have challenges as humans, So I'm wondering, this is an issue that happens to a lot of people in the facial difference community. I'm wondering if you were ever bullied at school or at recreational activities because of your speech or your appearance.
I don't remember any major issues. I mean, occasional comments but nothing that stands out. The one thing for me personally, I mean, I've always not I don't like having seen photos of myself. It took me a while to kind of understand that and go, that's okay. That's how I look like. So, because often it's there on your face, and you see it as a still photo. But I've learned to kind of say, that's okay. That is I am who I am.
Exactly. And this for me is kind of the $1 million question. Did your cleft related medical experiences have any bearing on your career decisions?
No, not really. I think because it was so far away as a child, and I was fortunate that once I had my last surgery as a toddler, I didn't have to have any kind of further medical follow-up. like many kids have to do. So I didn't really have an ongoing engagement with the healthcare system. So
Okay.
no, that wasn't a link at all.
It wasn't a link. Okay, you were just interested in going in that field.
Yeah, I grew into, for a whole bunch of different reasons, which is a whole different conversation. But
Yes. So I don't know if you know this, but AboutFace is a founding member of an association called Face Equality International. And they're creating a world where everyone is treated fairly, whatever their face looks like. What does face equality mean to you?
so I think it's on the same lines as I said before, that everybody's equal. We all should have equal opportunities, equal share of the love that goes around, that we're as deserving as anybody else for love and caring and for opportunities. And that's a message for everybody, really, that we, as you said before, we all have differences. Some are more visible and more challenging, but it shouldn't be presented as a way that allows us to be treated any differently.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I'm going to turn to our current global situation that we're all in right now. You've been a leader here in Canada, helping Nova Scotians navigate the pandemic and keeping everyone safe. Um, as you know, the pandemic has been very hard on many people. So, what are some tips that you give to people on how to stay active and also support mental health?
So I think a couple of things. It is recognizing as individuals, as families, even as challenge. I mean, we're fortunate in Nova Scotia, but even when you're in lockdown and you can't really go anywhere, we need to look after ourselves together. So making sure we're getting, being out or outside or even indoor, being at physical activity, moving around. We can always be, it's be more challenging to kind of eat healthy when you've got stress and all these things. So really trying to manage those fundamental things which keep us healthy. But there's a huge piece that the pandemic has had a significant impact on people's mental health. And I understand, a lot of stress, anxiety, more social isolation. But how do we actually stay connected with each other using, like we're doing today on, social media and other ways, here on this webinar. So what are we doing to make sure we're staying connected with each other, even if it may not be physically together? And I think one of my key messages is that how we get through this and how we look after ourselves is by really being very deliberate on how we care for each other. That this is a real time to really what we need to bring to the fore is really this looking after each other, which means finding ways to reach out, whether it's people in your street, family, friends, other ways that you can just figure out and who in your neighborhood may be struggling, and maybe you need to drop off a meal or even just drop off a letter or something, and just little ways that I think that helps others, but it also helps us when we reach out to others. It does something for us as well. So a key way to get through this is really emphasizing on how we care for each other.
I agree. And I also agree that with this kind of webinar, we are connecting as a community too. And even if we're all far and coming from different places in Canada, it helps. I feel more connected to this community with this kind of thing. So I have another question. So, many families are in attendance today, and kids with facial differences often encounter barriers to success. And what advice would you give kids growing up with a facial difference?
So yeah, and it's unfortunate that there are challenges that our society does not necessarily. But I think it's really believe in yourself that if like anybody else, you can whatever you want to do, you can actually achieve it if you work towards that. Don't let others kind of put limits on you. And maybe, and recognizing that, yeah, that there are some things that may not be that can be hurtful, and people put barriers in the way, but and getting support, looking for, as you get older, making sure you're looking for and to connect with people who are going to support you, who you make friends with, the opportunities you provide, where are they things that actually going to be supportive of you, and don't accept things that may not be as supportive. Now, that's some things aren't always in our control, but I think ultimately it comes down to understanding that each and every one of us are wonderful people, and don't let others put barriers and limits on us. As hard as that may be, because sometimes people aren't as nice and accepting as they should be, but try to move past that, and don't allow that to put limits on yourself.
Exactly. I agree completely with that. And I have a bit of a personal question here. How, like, to see somebody with a facial difference, like this, coming to us is very rare. And how do you feel how would you have liked to see other people, or how would things have changed for you if you would have seen other people who look different? Would that have impacted you in any way, or?
Well, it's actually, I think it would have, because even today, I until you reached out and AboutFace, I didn't know you existed. But the fact that there's a community out there, I think is amazing and wonderful. Because it comes back to our previous question, there is a place where even if other parts of our lives are challenging, there's a place where you can go and be fully accepted. And I think that's really, really important. And I think that would have, even for me, growing up, if knowing that there were other kids like me with having similar kind of surgeries and things like that, it really wasn't. I think that would have been good to have been part of that.
No, right? Yes. Thank you.
Part of our community.
Yes, it's that feeling of belonging and knowing. So, well, thank you so much. I know we have questions from the community, and Danielle, you're going to take over. Oh, Danielle, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry. So I can read them out for sure, Annie. There is one that is related to COVID-19, and it is there's two questions from a community member. Alim, who's also on our board. What do you think the lasting mental health impacts will be post-pandemic, and how do you hope Nova Scotians and Canadians emerge stronger?
So the first is, I think we have to actually recognize that there have been substantive mental health impacts on people, especially young people, that I really, people that at a time in their life are meant to be, youth and young adults are meant to be very social. That's part of our growth and development into mature adults, and that has been significantly limited on that. So I think what it calls for me is that we need to the opportunity maybe is we need to even more focus on how do we recognize, accept, and then support people with mental health issues. It's not just people with diagnosed mental disorders, but it's people with stress, anxiety, depression, that and I think part of it is that most of us have that at some point in our life, and it's okay to recognize that. It's okay to be public about that, and it's okay to ask for help. And then as how do we create different levels of support, and all the way from informal community supports to very structured healthcare supports. How do we do a better? I think there are many gaps in that part of our healthcare system. So how do we actually? This is an opportunity to very explicitly address the need to build a range of, as I said, from informal to all to very structured healthcare supports for people with mental health issues, and then we need, it's an opportunity for us to raise the awareness and actually break down much of the stigma around mental health. That it's probably quite normal for us at some point in our lives, and it's okay to reach out and ask for help.
For sure, and we've seen definitely over the past 14 months an increase in mental health support requests coming in through AboutFace. So it's really critically important that we talk about it, that we address it. And community events like this and opportunities for people to connect is a great way for people to feel less alone. And obviously right now, isolation is a serious issue, especially in places that might still be in lockdown or have tight restrictions. We do have another question. What role do you hope organizations like ours, AboutFace, will play in assisting physician professionals and the wider public in educating and contributing?
So I think organizations like AboutFace in medicine, I mean, you know, we're very good. We're highly technical, and there's many, you know, advances have been made in terms of surgery and other types of the medical piece. But again, it ties back to the mental health piece. The any kind of facial difference comes along with a lot of challenges. So what are the other parts that go along with whatever medical treatment, surgery that need to also be need to be looked at as well, whether it's, you know, helping make young people have the right opportunities. Do they have the right supports for their mental health, or just dealing with some of the challenges that having a facial difference brings, you know, what we call in medicine the kind of psychosocial supports. So it's looking at, I guess, the whole person, and also in the context of a family, and I think organizations like AboutFace can help with physicians and a part of the healthcare system to look at that bigger picture. Yes, we're dealing with surgery or other things, but how do you, you know, even if you want to use the word healing, how do you broaden the concept of healing beyond just the physical healing post-surgery, but is there psychological healing that needs to happen, not just for the individual, but maybe for the family. We know that you know, people with substantive physical or intellectual or disabilities have that has impacts on the whole family, and so we need to, you know, how do we support the whole family? So it's bringing that, I guess, that bigger picture, placing the medical needs as part of a bigger construct and a bigger picture, that I think organizations like AboutFace can help educate and through the voices of families, because it's often the voices of families and individuals who can articulate those broader needs and through their experience.
Sure. And I mean, it's part of our work every day is sharing stories so we can help build that sense of community and opportunity. But this actually leads to a question that I received on email from somebody. And they said they heard you talk about siblings, and they said, what would you suggest siblings can do to support their brother or sister with a facial difference?
I think first and foremost is being there in a very loving and supporting way, being willing to you know, when necessary, kind of stand up for their sibling. But also when recognizing again that often, and I have experience with this. I have one of my children has a different disability, but a very significant and complex disability. And often his needs have had to be, his sisters have had to be kind of play second fiddle, if you will, because my son's needs have had taken so much and still take so much priority. So I think there's something there as well about how do we make sure, recognize that, again, it comes back to this isn't just about the individual with the facial difference. What is the impact of that, and perhaps the increased need for medical and other care had on siblings who may not have had the same so it's a two-way street. How do the siblings support their brother or sister with a facial difference, but also recognizing that there's been impacts on them as well, and they may need some extra supports in some way. Living in a family with any type of disability can be hard on children.
Thank you for that. We have 3 questions, sort of 3 different areas. So I'm going to sort of go from the top. And the first one is, you touched upon it briefly. They want to know a little bit more. Why did you choose to go into medicine?
Well, it was interesting. I did my first, a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to be quick. So I was doing my first degree, what we would call now in kinesiology, and I was always interested in activity, and it just led to the interest in kind of like the body and how the body works. And I started doing a higher level degree in exercise physiology, but I didn't really want to go too down into the research world. So I said, well, where do I go with this interest in how the body works and all this kind of stuff? And people that I knew at university, some of them were applying for medicine. So it just kind of grew. I wasn't one of these people that said, I want to be a doctor. Some people do that from, I just kind of grew into it. And I've kind of come full circle in many ways through all my long journey into public health. I've been doing a lot of work in the last few years about the critical importance of where, as humans, we're made to move. And it's important that we're, physical activity, that we build a lot of movement into our lives as fundamental to our health, which takes me all the way full circle back to my first degree in kinesiology and the interest in exercise physiology. So it's kind of come full circle, and I'm involved in all sorts of other stuff, but that's a short story.
What's your favorite sport?
My favorite, rugby. I played up. I grew up. I played rugby all the way through university, and stopped playing, and then I refereed for 10 years beyond that. So yeah, for sure, rugby.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question, which was, did you ever have situations where your facial difference might have affected how people interacted with you throughout your career?
I've never become aware of anything that's had any major impact, and I'm probably very fortunate that way. But nothing that I was aware of. But who knows how people just, some people just make judgments on the way, immediate, their immediate reaction to how somebody looks. So, but there's nothing that's really I felt has kind of had a substantive impact on me. But I feel I'm very fortunate in that way.
Okay, thank you. And this is one that says, how can those of us who have not had to deal with facial differences, but who are sympathetic and supportive of those who have? So what can people do?
So I think too, just in your own life, it is like, just being fully accepting. That's just, but maybe somebody with some types of facial differences also needs some kind of accommodation. So, and that's fine. Just, so fully accepting of the person, but fully accepting of maybe there's accommodations or some limitations that they may need. But I also think this other thing is that we all be advocates for each other. It's a really important role that I see it shouldn't always be up to the person themselves or their family with whether it's a facial difference or some other type of in the whole disability or differently abled community. We need other people to kind of come alongside as well to say, I'm going to stand beside you. And so that's something we all, I ask, how can I be an advocate for somebody with a different type of, who's differently abled? So I think we all need to think about that. How are we making sure that we're not allowing any discrimination or any kind of hurtful kind of, whether it's action, speech, whatever, targeted to others, that we recognize it and we openly speak against it.
For sure. And I think addressing it and being open and honest about it is critically important. I have a question in regards to advocacy. You sort of touched upon it. As a medical doctor and a parent, How do you suggest parents go around or about advocating with healthcare or dental professionals in a way that feels productive and where they feel like their voices are being heard?
Oh, that's a that's a big question, and I think um, first is, I mean, and my wife and I have learned this with our son, is that if you don't take no for an answer, um, keep, it can be, and it can be challenging and it can be long battles, but you need to keep, if what you feel is really what's necessary, then keep asking for it and don't take, just keep going. Sometimes systems are really slow to change. Um, but I think you just really continue to be an advocate and just continue to build a case and but also doing that in a respectful way that as I'm often on my work, I work in a big bureaucracy and I get advocacy directed to me, and it's not, it doesn't, yes, you need to be forceful and continue to put things forward, but at the end of the day, whoever you're advocating to, they're a person as well, and they needed to be treated with some kindness and respect. So always being a very strong and relentless advocate, but always doing it in a way that treats individuals ultimately with respect and kindness as well. Because if you don't, I know, I have been on the receiving end of that kind of stuff. It doesn't actually help you in the long run if you're not respectful and kind to the people you're trying to get to advocate within a bureaucracy for your position.
Great advice. There is another question from the audience. So it says, thanks to the pandemic and other things, for example, mental health, it's become increasingly clear that we need to have more messaging and awareness of various conditions and causes. Do you think that awareness of facial differences has increased? And do you think there are specific ways it should be increased that might not be being addressed at the moment, for example?
So I'll be honest. I mean, it's never, despite my own personal story. I have a couple of friends who are plastic surgeons, and they do work with Operation Smile, which is really going overseas, but that's on the surgical, the medical part. I wasn't even, as I said before, and I'm embarrassed to say, I wasn't even aware of AboutFace. So I would venture to say that there's a lot of, that we're probably fairly new in the journey of raising awareness around facial differences. So there's clearly a lot of space for that, and hopefully that's through events like this and others that we starting to raise that awareness more and more. I do see there is things are still a lot of work needs to happen, but there's been substantive changes that I've seen in the last decade or more around differently abled people. People with differences and a growing acceptance of that. And I especially look at I have two daughters who are 25 and 17. And they give me a lot of hope in terms of their generation and things, and how they're their friends and everything are just seem to be much more accepting of a range of differences than perhaps my generation. So that gives me lots of hope. So there's always room for I guess building on that hope of it, of different acceptance and raising awareness specifically around facial differences.
Perfect. I think those are all the questions we have at the moment. Annie, do you have some more questions?
I think there's one more.
Oh, here it is. Okay. We know that mental health systems have come a long way and have a long way to go. Are you hopeful about the future in terms of accessibility around mental health supports as we move forward, especially as we've been talking a bit about that today in terms of the pandemic and what the future can look like?
So as I think with my previous answer, I think the opportunity of the pandemic, and that language, or I speak about that a lot, and people say, what do you mean opportunity? But I think there, we have to say, well, what can we learn from the pandemic? How does the response actually identify issues and that we make, turn into positives? So I think the discussion around mental health and the fact that so many people have had mental health challenges creates an opportunity to say, you know what, having challenges with mental health is not abnormal. In fact, it's extremely common. So how it gives us a space to actually allow people to be open about it, reduce stigma, and then build systems that actually support people, whether it's in schools, as we support families and workplaces, just normalizing and saying, yeah, all of us at some point needs in our lives are likely to need some supports for mental health, and that's perfectly okay, and that's just the norm. I think that the opportunity of the pandemic is to really advance that type of discussion.
Sure, absolutely. Are there any other questions? I'm going to open it up to everyone. We still have some time with Dr. Strang. If anyone has questions, they can definitely forward those on to us, and we can take them over the next couple of minutes. If there are any, just let me know. What advice would you give AboutFace in terms of who to connect with to talk about our story? I mean, I know you've mentioned a couple of times you hadn't heard of us before. So who do you think it would be good for us to talk to in the future so we can share our stories and our work?
I mean, I think, often finding, having a connect with people in the media. So what role can they play in terms of taking people's individuals and families and their story and having them told more broadly in the media, and hopefully as we it becomes and just raising awareness through that, and just having how do we also create advocates that people with, or their families, people with facial differences are just willing to be out there and having their story told, and not just their story, but also doing totally normal things like the rest of us would do. But that's part of the story too, that having a facial difference does not need to create barriers in participation in whether it's sports, academic achievement, a whole range of things, right? That it's just they're part of the community like just as everybody else. And so how do you demonstrate both the, there's two aspects. It can be obviously everybody's got challenges and things, but also how do you also tell the story that despite all that they're just another person in the community and doing all sorts of wonderful things.
And you being here sharing your story with us today it's a big step. It's a big opportunity as well. Anything else that you would like to ask?
No, it's been wonderful. I do want to ask, I hope he's on. I think my buddy Huey is participating, and I don't know how many folks know that story. I had the great pleasure of meeting Huey, who's been an inspiration to me about his joy and how he just takes life on fully. I've only met him a few times, but boy, he's got the energy of 10 people, and he just nothing stops him. So he's a wonderful guy. So I hope you're on there, Huey.
That was a great story I think it was on, I saw it on television in the fall, I think.
Yes, me too. Yeah. I saw that. Okay.
We do have one last minute question, Dr. Strang, if you're open to it.
Sure.
How difficult do you feel going back to regular medicine will be post-pandemic? A bit of a career-focused question.
Yeah, it's going to mean, even my work in public health is going to be changed now. I learned, there's so many things, and I think there's some of the long-lasting things we've learned from COVID, even within public health, that it won't go back. No part of life is going to go back to what it was pre-COVID. Believe me, there's lots of work to do to say, what do we learn from COVID even within public health? How do we be better prepared for the next kind of large infectious disease event? Because we will have another one. So how do we learn? But also some of the things in public health that, we've learned, there are different parts of our society have been more impacted than others from the pandemic. So and they're based on groups that have lots of challenges before the pandemic. You know, people from racialized communities, people who were low income without, you know, people without housing. So that to me is a big focus about how do we do a better job of supporting those in our community who are less fortunate than others. And I think that is a key lesson from the pandemic that we can all move forward. That should hopefully impacts all of our lives. Whatever we're doing in our work, we're doing it in a way that comes back to that. How do we lift everybody up and care for each other more, which is a key lesson from the pandemic.
You sound very hopeful.
You always have to be hopeful. There's always hope.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we have another question coming through. In your opinion, has the Canadian medical establishment gotten better at addressing the needs of new immigrant families in racialized community, et cetera, born with a difference? So another sort of career-focused question.
I think we have gotten better. Do we still have a lot to improve on? Absolutely. But I said hope. I'm kind of a glass half full kind of person that we always say, are we trying to make things better every day, addressing an issue, but also acknowledging that you know, all these things take time, and so we should be focusing on is that making things a little better. Because if you look at things and go, oh, there's so much that we have to do to support kind of immigrant families, I'll use that issue, that you can get paralyzed by the need rather than saying, okay, how do we break it down and make little steps, continue to move forward and make things a little better. And maybe that's a message for everybody, even in our lives. How do we focus on with a sense of hope and the positive? And even though you may be facing a lot of challenges with a facial difference, how are we working to support people, and how are they doing things to always being a little bit better, and not becoming paralyzed because there's a great big challenge in front of you, but trying to break it down and do almost like eating a great big cookie. If you see the big cookie, you can't, but start taking one little bite at a time and keep moving forward.
Awesome. It's very good advice for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another question's coming through as well. Do you have any tips for us in the facial difference community that want to go into medicine?
If that's what you want to do, if you got a passion for that, go for it. Do it. I'm a big believer in following what you want to, if you really believe that, and don't let people put barriers in your way that shouldn't be there. And you'll find a way to do it. Medicine's challenging, but we need diversity in medicine, including people with facial differences. Right. The more we can show diversity and show that there's a place for everybody, then it just sends a message for the next generation. And I think it makes the medical profession better, more empathetic and caring when people who have their own experiences then become caregivers.
Excellent. Okay. I think those are all the questions we have for today. I want to convey my thanks to both Annie and Dr. Strang. Annie, if you want to say a last few words, I can turn it over to you.
Yes, I just want to thank Dr. Strang. One thing I've noticed today is your empathy and positivity. It's greatly appreciated, and it gives us hope for the future. It gives us hope for living in the pandemic and moving forward, and it gives us hope. It gives me hope as somebody with a facial difference that you understand and you have empathy around the issues, and that we can all together as a community move forward. So thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for the opportunity, and you know, I'd be very happy to support AboutFace in the future as well. And thanks to everybody for taking time to join in.
Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for joining us. We will have this available so people can watch it on our YouTube channel a little bit later this spring. And I'm very grateful to you both. Thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.